Your body knows, long before your mind can grasp it, long before anyone speaks it into existence, long before the event itself arrives. Your body has already been whispering, warning, signaling that something monumental is approaching. It's been speaking to you all week, in a language your mind doesn't control. You felt it though, perhaps you couldn't name it. Perhaps you blamed it on stress, the weather, lack of sleep. But deep beneath it all, in the place where your intuition speaks louder than your thoughts, you know something is ending. And it's not a distant, vague someday. No, this is 48 hours away. On March 3rd, a total lunar eclipse will strike at 12 degrees Virgo, closing a cosmic loop that's been building since February 20th. Every seed planted, every disruption, every revelation, every emotion that has risen to the surface over the past 10 days has been preparing you for this exact moment. But today is not the eclipse. Today is March 16. And this moment right now, this one might be the most crucial day in the entire sequence. Because today, you still have a choice. You stand on the edge of what's to come, and how you meet it is still yours to decide. Let me make this clear. A lunar eclipse isn't just a full moon. It's not a time for things to come to completion or visibility. It's a time for things to disappear. A lunar eclipse obliterates. The moon is swallowed by darkness, and with it, the universe unplugs what has been running on autopilot in your life. You won't choose what ends. It will be identified for you. It will be what's already dead, but still tethered by habit. The eclipse doesn't ask you to end something, it removes what's already past its prime. Listen to your body. It's already telling you. It's time to let go. A lunar eclipse is not a celebration of light. It is not a soft unveiling. It is not the sky handing you a pretty moment of closure with a silver ribbon around it. A full moon can do that. A full moon can flood the room, sharpen the edges, expose what has been sitting in shadow, and bring a story to its visible peak. It reveals, it ripens, it turns the volume up. But an eclipse moves by another law. An eclipse does not increase the light. It interrupts it. It is a threshold event, a severing event, a moment when the usual signal is cut and the deeper architecture underneath your life gets exposed, not by brightness, but by absence. The moon does not glow brighter under an eclipse. It is overtaken, covered, claimed by shadow, and that shadow does not arrive to confuse you. It arrives to tell the truth without decoration. This is where most people miss the moment. They think an eclipse is about drama. They think it is about chaos, emotion, unpredictability, spectacle. They think it is some vague cosmic intensity that makes people reactive for a few days and then disappears. That is the cheap reading. That is the surface reading. The real mechanism is more precise than that, and much less sentimental. A lunar eclipse exposes what has been artificially sustained. It reveals what has not been alive for a long time, but has still been moving through your life because you kept feeding it with your attention, your rituals, your loyalty, your fear, your performance, your refusal to stop. It shows you where energy has still been flowing into something that no longer contains spirit. A pattern, a role, a devotion, a responsibility, a routine, a version of yourself. And when the shadow arrives, it does not negotiate with what is empty. It cuts the current. That is why this window feels so different from an ordinary culmination. This is not about bringing everything to a beautiful finish. This is about removing power from what should have ended already. Something in your life has been kept running by habit instead of truth. Something has been surviving on your maintenance rather than its own vitality. Something has been held together by your management, your explanations, your discipline, your guilt, your ability to keep showing up after the life has already left the room. That is what an eclipse finds. Not because it is cruel, because it is exact. An eclipse does not randomly take. It identifies the false continuation. It locates the system, bond, obligation, identity, or internal contract that has outlived its real function, and it stops pretending with you. It does not ask whether you are emotionally ready to admit it. It does not wait for your perfect language. It does not require consensus from the people around you. It moves by a cleaner intelligence than that. It knows the difference between what is changing and what is finished. That distinction matters. Some things in your life are in transition. They are alive, but changing form. They require patience, faith, recalibration. But some things are not in transition. They are over. They have been over. The only thing keeping them in motion has been your reluctance to let silence tell the truth. And this is the function of the eclipse: to remove the artificial support, to stop the drip feed, to end the extension, to bring the reality forward in a form your nervous system can no longer edit. This is why your body has been ahead of your mind. Your body does not care about your narrative management. It does not care how convincing your explanations are. It does not care how many times you have told yourself, maybe it's not that serious, or maybe I just need one more week, or maybe if I try harder, it can still become what I wanted it to be. The body has no interest in maintaining fiction once the deeper field has shifted. The body is a truth instrument. It registers pressure before language. It receives the message before the intellect builds a story around it. Your mind has been trying to broker a deal. Your mind has been bargaining with timelines, reframing what is obvious, calling exhaustion a phase, calling misalignment responsibility, calling grief confusion, calling avoidance patience, calling dead weight commitment. The mind is skilled at this. It can build a cathedral around denial and then kneel inside it like it found religion. The body cannot do that. The body is more ancient than your argument. So when the field begins to change, when the sky starts closing in around an ending, when the window narrows and what is unsustainable begins losing oxygen, the body responds first. Not poetically, not symbolically, practically, directly, through fatigue, through tightness, through disrupted sleep, through strange emotion, through the sensation that something is nearing a threshold even when nothing external has happened yet. Because the body does not speak in opinions. It speaks in signals. It speaks in pressure where you have been overholding. It speaks in heaviness where you have been overcarrying. It speaks in restlessness where truth has been delayed. It speaks in sudden tears where a sealed room inside you has started to crack. It speaks in irritation when the system can no longer tolerate the performance required to keep an old structure intact. It speaks in dream fragments, in jaw tension, in stomach knots, in that strange feeling of emotional weather changing before the storm is visible. And no, that does not mean every sensation is mystical. It means your body is part of reality, not separate from it. When a major threshold is approaching, the body often registers it as impact before the conscious mind catches up. That is not weakness. That is intelligence. That is your system picking up on what your words have not yet admitted. So if this week has felt unusual, if your reactions have felt amplified, if your sleep has turned strange, if your energy has been inconsistent, if your patience has thinned, if old memories have come floating up with no invitation, if your inner life has had that charged and silent feeling right before a subway train enters the station and the whole platform changes pressure for a second, pay attention. Something is shifting out of maintenance mode and into consequence. This is the real briefing. You are not being punished. You are being brought into contact with what can no longer be carried forward in its current form. The eclipse is not arriving to destroy what is alive. It is arriving to remove what has been impersonating life. And the closer that moment gets, the less your body is willing to help you fake it. So do not dismiss the signals because they are inconvenient. Do not anesthetize them just because they interrupt your routine. Do not explain away every symptom with the first reasonable excuse. Listen beneath the noise. There is information in what your body has been trying to tell you. Because once the shadow fully arrives, the conversation changes. First, the body warns. Then the sky confirms. And what happens next is not random. It is revelation by subtraction. Now, let's talk about the signals themselves, because many of you have been receiving the same ones. And by now, you already know this is not imaginary. What many of you are feeling right now is not ordinary fatigue. It is not the kind of tiredness a long night, a missed meal, or a hard week can explain. It is deeper than that, stranger than that. You sleep and still wake up like something in you has been laboring in the dark. Your eyes open, but your system feels miles behind. Your body rises, but your energy does not fully return. That is because this is not only physical depletion. This is the wear of inner reorganization. This is what it feels like when the soul has been moving heavy material through the basement levels, while the mind is still trying to act normal upstairs. Since the Saturn-Neptune threshold on February 20, something has been dissolving and restructuring at the same time. Not loudly, not always visibly, but continuously. A hidden demolition, a quiet rewiring. Your inner architecture has been under revision, and the body has been paying the invoice. That is why rest has felt elusive, even when you technically got enough sleep, because sleep is not always restoration. Sometimes sleep is where the work continues. Sometimes the night is not an escape from the process. It is the workshop. That is why the dream field has been so active. Some of you have been dreaming in full color, with cinematic detail. Some of you have been waking from dreams that feel too charged to dismiss, too precise to call random. Old faces, old rooms, old relationships, people you have not thought about in years returning without warning, conversations that never happened in waking life, but carry the emotional truth of something unfinished. Images that linger all day like smoke on clothing. This is not meaningless overflow. This is the psyche processing backlog. Mercury retrograde in Pisces has opened the archive and turned your dream state into a sorting room for unresolved material. The eclipse approaching is tightening the deadline. Your subconscious knows the window is narrowing. So what happens? Files start surfacing. Fragments return. What you buried under productivity, politeness, survival, or time begins moving again. Not to torment you, to clear, to close, to complete. Every dream has been part message, part release, part evidence. The mind may forget details by breakfast, but the nervous system remembers the impact. That is why some mornings feel emotionally heavy before anything even happens. You are waking up after a night shift. Your conscious mind was not supervising. And then there is the body itself. The jaw locking for no clear reason. The shoulders carrying a weight no one can see. The neck stiffening like it is bracing for a blow that never visibly lands. The stomach tightening around truths you have not said out loud. The lower back aching with the burden of what you have been forcing yourself to carry. Headaches that arrive without pattern, then leave just as mysteriously. Random waves of tension that move through the body like a signal trying to get your attention. Listen carefully. These are not just inconveniences. They are locations. The body stores what the voice suppresses. It records what the personality edits out. It keeps the score long after the mind has rewritten the story into something manageable. So when a threshold like this approaches, those storage sites begin to activate. Pressure builds where emotion has been contained too long. The eclipse does not create that pressure from nothing. It reveals where pressure has already been living. It intensifies the places where energy has been trapped, where grief has been shelved, where anger has been domesticated, where fear has been made functional. Your body is not malfunctioning. It is testifying. It is saying, this cannot stay buried in the same form. It is saying, what you have been clenching around is asking to be acknowledged before it breaks containment on its own. It is saying, release it consciously, or the system will eventually release it for you. That is the warning in this window. Because when the body begins signaling this consistently, it means the inner dam is under strain. It means the old emotional agreements are no longer holding cleanly. It means what has been packed down, swallowed, managed, minimized, spiritualized, or postponed is getting closer to the surface, and you still have a narrow span of time to work with that message deliberately. Not dramatically, deliberately. Slow down enough to notice where the signal is coming from. Notice what worsens when you force yourself to perform as if nothing is changing. Notice what eases when you stop pretending to be available for everything. Notice which memories keep returning. Notice which names rise in dreams. Notice which part of your body tenses when you think about a certain obligation, a certain person, a certain future. The body is specific. It is not vague once you stop overriding it. This is the real message. Exhaustion is not always a flaw. Sometimes it is a stop sign. Dreams are not always noise. Sometimes they are the final language of what your waking self refused to process. Tension is not always just tension. Sometimes it is truth compressed into muscle, and with an eclipse this close, compression does not last forever. So do not wait for a breakdown to confirm what your body has already been saying in a whisper. The whisper is mercy. The signal is mercy. The fatigue, the dreams, the pressure in the body, these are not interruptions to the process. They are the process. They are the early transmission. They are the evidence that something in you already knows what the mind is still trying to postpone. The window is open now. Listen while the message is still arriving as sensation, before it arrives as irreversible change. Then there is the strangest signal of all. The feeling that something is already ending, even though nothing visible has ended yet. No clear event, no final conversation, no official loss, no dramatic scene you can point to and say, "There, that's it." And still, something inside you has gone quiet in a way you can't ignore. A low ache, a spiritual weather shift, a subtle but unmistakable sense that a chapter is closing behind your back while your mind is still trying to read the previous page. This is one of the hardest sensations to explain because it arrives without a clean narrative. It does not come with evidence first. It comes as atmosphere, as weight, as an almost sacred heaviness. You feel grief, but it is not attached to one person, one place, one outcome. You feel sorrow, but it has no simple biography. It does not introduce itself. It moves through you like a tide with no visible moon, like smoke entering a room before anyone sees the fire. You may have tried to dismiss it. You may have told yourself you are being too sensitive, too tired, too dramatic, too affected by things that should not matter this much. But this is not random emotion, and it is not weakness. It is perception. Something in you has sensed the edge before your conscious mind has been willing to name it. The eclipse has not fully arrived, but the field around it is already moving, and your emotional body is built to detect shifts long before your logical mind can make them presentable. That is why this feeling is so disorienting. You are responding to a closure that has not yet taken public form. You are grieving ahead of the evidence. You are feeling the departure before the door has visibly opened. That does not mean you are imagining it. It means your deeper system has picked up the signal. There are moments in life when the soul knows before the storyline does. This is one of those moments. Something has already begun withdrawing its energy. Something has already reached the point of no return in the unseen layers. The paperwork may not be filed yet. The words may not have been spoken yet. The outer event may still be 2 steps away. But inwardly, the ending has started casting a shadow, and your heart has recognized it. That is why your reactions may feel amplified right now. Someone says one small thing and suddenly your chest tightens. A brief inconvenience lands like an insult from the universe. A passing image, a line in a song, a commercial half heard in the background, and your eyes fill before you even understand why. It can feel embarrassing if you judge it from the surface. It can feel excessive if you measure it only against the immediate trigger. But the trigger is rarely the true source right now. The trigger is just where the pressure leaks, and that distinction matters. Because what looks like overreaction is often release arriving through the nearest available opening. The system is venting. The body is finding small exits for emotion that has been building behind the walls. Tiny cracks, manageable waves, controlled burns. What comes out in these moments is not just about the comment, the delay, the inconvenience, the image on the screen. It is the backlog moving. It is what your system has been carrying beginning to unseal in increments, because a wiser part of you knows that gradual release is mercy. Your nervous system is trying to spare you from rupture. It is trying to let the steam out before the vessel is forced to blow open all at once. That sudden urge to cry over something minor, that flash of irritation that feels larger than the moment, that inexplicable ache that passes through for no obvious reason, do not reduce those moments to instability. Read them correctly. They are emotional pressure valves. They are the early mechanisms of decompression. They are your inner world attempting to release in portions what would otherwise arrive as overwhelm. So, let the small waves come. Do not shame the tears because they arrived through a side door. Do not judge the tenderness because it surfaced in an ordinary moment. Do not force every emotion to present a legal argument before you allow it to exist. Some feelings arrive ahead of explanation. Some grief is intelligent before it is articulate. Some endings are registered in the body long before they are confirmed in the visible world. This is why restraint matters now, but not the cold kind, not repression, not emotional lockdown. What matters is reverence, space, the discipline to let what is surfacing move without turning every feeling into a crisis and without turning every signal into a performance. You do not need to dramatize what is happening, but you do need to respect it, because this window is not casual. Something is approaching, and part of your emotional body is already preparing the way. These smaller releases are not interruptions to your stability. They are preserving it. They are helping you empty the chambers little by little so that when the larger turning point arrives, it does not have to tear through you to make itself known. So if you feel sadness without a clear source, honor it. If you feel anger rise faster than usual, study it. If tenderness catches you off guard, do not shut the door on it. The horizon is already changing. Your inner weather knows that before the sky says it out loud. Let the pressure leave in whispers, so it does not have to leave in collapse. And then, the outer world starts echoing the inner one. Things stall. Systems misfire. The rhythm you normally rely on begins slipping out of sequence. A meeting disappears off the calendar. A device freezes at the exact wrong moment. A text gets misunderstood. A conversation that should have stayed simple bends into tension. Plans that looked solid in the morning are suddenly unusable by evening. What usually moves cleanly through the machinery of your day starts catching, dragging, breaking pattern. Do not dismiss that too quickly. When a Virgo eclipse draws near, disruption rarely enters like theater. It enters through function, through the small mechanics of daily life, through the places where order is supposed to hold. Virgo governs the architecture of the ordinary. Routines, systems, workflow, physical maintenance, labor, discipline, service, the invisible scaffolding that keeps life coherent from one day to the next. So, when an eclipse strikes this territory, it does not begin by shaking the sky. It begins by exposing the weak points in the wiring. This is the signature, not random chaos, diagnostic chaos. Because an eclipse in Virgo does not merely interrupt your schedule, it tests the integrity of the systems you have built your life around. It reveals which structures are actually supporting you and which ones have only been surviving because you keep forcing yourself to participate. It shows you where precision has become compulsion, where responsibility has turned into self-erasure, where routine has outlived purpose and become ritual without spirit. That is why the ordinary starts acting strange. The daily machinery is under review. What you are seeing in these glitches is not just inconvenience, it is disclosure. The parts of your life that are aligned may bend, but they tend to hold. The parts that have been running on momentum, fear, over-control, obligation, or unconscious repetition begin to fail in plain sight. Suddenly, the structure does not cooperate. The timing goes off. The usual method stops delivering. The usual result, and that is not because you are doing everything wrong. It is because something is showing you that the old way no longer has clean power behind it. Virgo is exacting. An eclipse makes that exactness unavoidable. So if your day has felt strangely inefficient, if your routines have started resisting you, if the systems you count on are no longer obeying the script, pay attention. This is not just about annoyance. This is information. It is the visible world revealing where your life has become over-engineered in the wrong places and undernourished in the right ones. And here is the part almost nobody names. Sometimes, the first symptom of a major energetic ending is not emotion. It is friction. It is life refusing to keep moving smoothly through structures that no longer match who you are becoming. It is the door sticking, the signal dropping, the schedule collapsing just enough to show you what was never stable to begin with. The breakdown is not always punishment. Sometimes it is exposure. Sometimes it is mercy. Sometimes it is the only way reality can get your attention after you have ignored quieter signs. So do not rush to force everything back into place. Watch what keeps failing. Watch what no longer flows without strain. Watch which parts of your daily life require unnatural effort just to appear functional. Because when Virgo is eclipsed, the message comes through the mechanics. What is real will stand with less effort. What is expired will start revealing itself through disruption. And that revelation is not the problem. It is the beginning of the correction. And then it happens. Not gradually. Not through a long chain of reasoning. Not because you finally sat down with a notebook and analyzed every angle until the answer became acceptable. It arrives all at once. Clean. Undeniable. A flash of inner certainty in the middle of an ordinary moment. Standing under running water, waiting at a red light. Half listening in a conversation that suddenly opens a door you did not know was there. And without warning, you know what has to change. You know what you can no longer keep carrying. You know what has already ended in spirit, even if it has not yet ended in form. That kind of knowing does not come from overthinking. It does not rise from the anxious mind. It does not ask permission from your fear. It enters like a sealed message, finally breaking open, complete on arrival, whole before language. The mind usually works in pieces: comparison, doubt, logic, revision. But this is different. This comes through as a total impression, as if the truth has crossed the river all at once and stepped onto the shore fully clothed. That is why it can feel almost unnerving. Because when real clarity comes, it does not sound like mental noise. It does not argue with itself. It does not perform. It lands with a strange stillness, almost heavier than emotion, almost quieter than thought. It does not need 10 supporting reasons. It carries its own authority, and part of you recognizes that authority immediately, even if another part starts panicking the second it realizes what that truth will require. This is what happens when a threshold gets close enough that the signal can no longer be blocked. Before the visible event arrives, consciousness begins receiving advance contact. The eclipse does not only move in the sky, it moves through awareness. It casts a shadow ahead of itself, and sometimes that shadow touches the mind not as confusion, not as drama, but as revelation. A sentence with no edits. A recognition with no rehearsal. A private moment where something inside you stands up and says, "Enough. This changes now." Do not underestimate that moment. Most people do. They receive the truth, and then immediately put it on trial. They cross-examine it. They dilute it. They call 3 people. They intellectualize it until the pulse goes out of it. They start negotiating with what was crystal clear 10 seconds ago. They ask whether it was too sudden, too emotional, too extreme, too inconvenient, too untimely. They treat direct knowing like a suspect and confusion like wisdom. Do not do that in this window, because over the next 48 hours, the temptation will be to talk yourself out of what landed cleanly, to reduce it, to explain it away, to return it to ambiguity, because ambiguity feels safer than obedience. Once the truth arrives, the mind often scrambles to protect the old structure. It starts producing alternatives, softening the edges, offering delays, manufacturing one last fantasy in which nothing really has to change yet. But clarity of this kind is not an accident. It is not random. It is not instability. It is not you being dramatic. It is the deeper intelligence in you, surfacing ahead of the event itself. It is your system receiving the memo before the outer world delivers the public version. That is why it feels complete. Because it did not originate in analysis. It originated below it. It rose from the part of you that has been watching the pattern long after your conscious mind got tired and looked away. So, if the knowing has come, hold it carefully. Do not force action in a frenzy. But do not betray the message either. Write it down. Protect it from noise. Let it sit in the center of the room without immediately inviting doubt to interrogate it. You do not need to make it prettier. You do not need to make it easier. You do not need to make it less true so other people can tolerate it. You need to honor the fact that something real has already been shown to you. And if these symptoms, these moments, these signals have been familiar, hear this clearly. Your body is not failing you. Your mind is not collapsing. Your sensitivity is not the problem. You are in preparation. Your system has been bracing, adjusting, transmitting, clearing space for a turning point that is larger than the average emotional fluctuation, larger than the average transit, larger than the ordinary churn of a hard week. This is not random overwhelm. This is alignment pressure. This is your inner world, making room for one of the strongest resets of the year so far. That is why the signals feel amplified. That is why the truth is arriving faster. That is why what used to be tolerable suddenly feels impossible to maintain. The reset has already begun in the unseen. Now the question is whether you will trust what has been shown before the outer event makes it undeniable. Because there are moments in a year when life whispers, and there are moments when it marks the door. This is the second kind. So when the clarity comes, do not shrink from it. When the message lands, do not pretend you did not hear it. When the knowing arrives, recognize it for what it is. Advance instruction from the edge of change. The window is open. The signal is real. And what has been revealed to you now is not here to be debated into silence. It is here to prepare you for what comes next. Let me lay out the sequence clearly, because this did not begin on the day of the eclipse, and it will not make sense if you treat it like an isolated event. What is coming has structure. It has timing. It has been assembling itself in layers, pressure by pressure, signal by signal, since February 20. This week was not random. It was engineered. Every shift in mood, every rupture, every strange delay, every sudden recognition has been part of a larger design moving toward one point of arrival. February 20. Saturn met Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. That was the first breach. Not a collapse. A dissolution. There is a difference. Collapse is loud. Dissolution is quieter, stranger, more unnerving because it does not always look like failure at first. It looks like certainty, losing density. It looks like the structures you trusted beginning to turn translucent. Beliefs you thought were fixed started softening at the edges. The identity framework you had been using to explain yourself began to lose some of its authority. Even your spiritual understanding, what you thought was solid, what you thought was settled, what you thought you had already named, started to become more fluid than your mind was comfortable admitting. That was the true beginning of this passage. The floor did not crack beneath you. The floor went soft, and when the ground softens, everything built on top of it starts to reveal its weight. That conjunction at the first degree of Aries was not subtle in meaning. It was a threshold signature. A world point signal. The old terms of selfhood no longer holding the same command. The old scaffolding dissolving just enough for the deeper truth underneath to start breathing through. You may have felt disoriented then, but that was not confusion for its own sake. That was reality losing the costume it had been wearing. Then came February 25. Mercury stationed retrograde in Pisces, and the whole mental atmosphere changed. The pace of thought shifted. Language got less exact. Linear logic stopped feeling like the primary instrument. You may have noticed it in your focus, in your timing, in the strange way memory and emotion began crossing wires. Conversations felt less crisp. Certainty became harder to pin down. But that was not a defect in the system. That was the system changing modes. Mercury retrograde in Pisces does not favor sharp analysis. It does not reward over-explaining. It pulls the mind off the stage and sends it backstage. It turns down the volume on direct expression and heightens receptivity. The intellect stops broadcasting and starts absorbing. Thought stops charging forward and begins listening through the walls. Logic loosens its grip, and feeling steps into the front room. This matters because once Mercury shifted, you were no longer processing life only through reason. You were processing through symbol, intuition, memory, dream, atmosphere, which means what happened next did not land on a neutral field. It landed on a mind already made porous. Then, February 27, Mars squared Uranus at 27 degrees. That was the strike, the volatile break, the exposed wire, the flashpoint where what had been unstable could no longer pretend to be secure. This was the moment the pressure found an outlet, the moment whatever had been hiding behind politeness, routine, image, or delay became harder to contain. Someone may have shown you exactly who they were. Something may have snapped into visibility with almost offensive speed. A truth may have arrived so suddenly it bypassed interpretation and went straight into the nervous system. That transit did not invent the fracture. It revealed it. Mars brought force. Uranus brought shock. Together, they split open whatever had already been weakened by the Saturn-Neptune softening and the Mercury retrograde haze. This is why the truth may have felt abrupt, even violent, not necessarily in action, but in impact. It came fast. It came bright. It came without asking whether the timing was convenient. That is how lightning works. It does not negotiate with the tree. It shows where the charge already was. Then February 28, Venus met Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And after the rupture, there was tenderness, not sentimentality, not fantasy, tenderness. The emotional underlayer rising once the defenses were cracked. A message behind the disruption. A softening around the truth. The realization that underneath the shock, something more intimate was trying to speak. Maybe a heart truth. Maybe grief. Maybe affection. Maybe the recognition that beneath all the noise, love, or the absence of love had been the deeper operating system all along. Venus, with Mercury retrograde in Pisces, does not speak in bullet points. It speaks in resonance, in memory, in unfinished feeling, in emotional intelligence rising after the impact event. It says, now that the armor is open, what is the heart actually trying to tell you? What did the mind fail to articulate? Because it was too busy maintaining order, what has been known emotionally for months, maybe years, that can finally step forward now that the surface has been broken. And now, March 16, this is not the main event. This is the chamber before it. This is the field between revelation and consequence. The threshold between signal and formalization. You are standing in the exact space where all of those transits converge. The dissolving of old certainty, the slowing of the rational mind, the electric shock of exposed truth, the soft arrival of emotional meaning. None of that was separate. It was a sequence, a build, a coded progression toward what arrives next, because in 48 hours, the eclipse lands. And when it lands, it does not invent the ending, it harvests it. That is the part people keep getting wrong. They imagine the eclipse as a dramatic beginning, when in truth it is often the formal closing of something that has already been moving toward completion for a long time. The selection has already happened beneath the surface. The pattern has already been marked. The cord has already been thinned. The question now is not whether something is finishing. Something is finishing. The real question is whether you will meet that ending consciously, or whether you will still be arguing with reality when reality removes the final support. This eclipse perfects at 12 degrees Virgo. That matters because Virgo does not deal in abstraction. Virgo rules what is lived, repeated, maintained, tracked, corrected, endured. It rules the architecture of daily life. your health, your routines, your work rhythms, your habits, your service, your systems, the ordinary structures that quietly shape your reality. So this eclipse is not only symbolic, it is embodied. It goes straight to the mechanics. Health may be part of the message, not catastrophe, but pattern. The way you treat your body every day. The habits you call discipline that may actually be punishment. The methods you call control that may actually be fear. The routines you have maintained because they look functional from the outside, even though they have stopped being restorative on the inside. Virgo will expose that. It will show you where the body has been managed instead of cared for. Work is also under review. Not necessarily employment itself, but the quality of your participation. The tolerance that has kept you performing through depletion. The invisible resignation behind the smile. The autopilot labor. The daily output that no longer has living consent behind it. This eclipse can end the part of you that was willing to keep doing what drains you simply because it was familiar. Sometimes the ending is not the job. Sometimes it is your capacity to keep lying about what the job costs. Then there are the routines, the systems, the habits you follow because they once served you and were never re-evaluated after your life changed. This eclipse will separate what still supports your real life from what only supports an outdated version of you. That distinction is everything. Some structures are stabilizing, others are ancestral, performative. Virgo will not let them hide together anymore. And service, this is where the axis becomes spiritual, because the sun is in Pisces, directly opposing this eclipse from 12 degrees Pisces. So what is activated here is not just Virgo in isolation. It is the Virgo-Pisces axis, service and surrender, management and faith, daily reality and spiritual truth, labor and meaning, the visible method and the invisible current beneath it. The question of this eclipse is not merely what you do each day. It is why. It is whether your outer life reflects your deeper truth, whether your routines are aligned with your spirit, whether your service is sacred, or whether it has decayed into self-abandonment, dressed up as responsibility. If the daily life no longer matches the soul, the daily life will be edited. That is what this eclipse is doing, creating alignment through removal. And Mercury retrograde is still active when it happens. That is critical, because it means these endings are not random, recent, or surface level. They are connected to the past. A loop is closing. A pattern is reaching its final repetition. A lesson you have been circling is arriving at graduation level. The roots go deeper than this week, deeper than this month. For some of you, deeper than this year. What ends now may look immediate, but its history runs long. Then there is the deepest layer of all, the nodes. This eclipse falls on the South Node in Virgo. That makes it a release event of uncommon force. South Node eclipses do not merely shut a door. They break attachment. They do not just remove the pattern. They dissolve the psychic tether to the pattern. What once felt necessary starts losing its grip. What once looked non-negotiable begins to feel strangely weightless. In 3 months, many of you will look back and wonder how you carried it for so long. Not because you became stronger overnight, because the need itself was extracted. Across from that, the North Node in Pisces pulls you forward, toward trust, toward surrender, toward spiritual coherence, toward the kind of life that cannot be built through control alone. Every release on the Virgo side opens space on the Pisces side. Every dead routine that falls away frees energy for intuition. Every overbuilt system that fails creates room for flow. Every obligation that ends makes space for a cleaner form of devotion. So, understand this correctly. The ending is not merely loss. It is exchange. You are not being emptied for nothing. You are being asked to trade the overmanaged and exhausted for the unforced and alive. The familiar drain for the unfamiliar nourishment. The rigid structure for a truer alignment. What leaves now is not being taken at random. It is being cleared because the next chapter cannot enter a life still crowded by expired forms. That is the architecture. That is what this week has been building. And now the window is narrow. The pressure is real. The field is set. What remains is your willingness to recognize that the harvest is already chosen and to meet it with enough honesty that when the shadow arrives, it finds you awake. Today is not the impact. Today is the stillness before it. The water has already drawn back from the shore. And when the tide pulls out this far, it reveals what was never meant to stay hidden. The wreckage on the seafloor, the old structures, the dead circuitry, the commitments that expired months ago but kept moving on, momentum alone. You can see it now if you are honest. The habits that no longer carry life. The obligations your spirit quietly withdrew from long before your calendar did. The connections still wearing the shape of relationship, even though presence left and only memory remained. This is the low tide hour. This is the exposed moment. And what matters in the next 48 hours is not dramatic action. It is restraint. It is refusal. It is the discipline to stop feeding what is already over. Stop propping up what your body has been trying to release. Stop volunteering your life force to arrangements that have already gone hollow. Stop performing loyalty to a rhythm that your heart outgrew in silence. Stop repeating a ritual just because you are afraid of the silence that would follow if you let it end. Because the eclipse does not need your permission to complete its work. It will move either way. The difference is not whether the ending comes. The difference is how you meet it. Consciously, with dignity, with your hands open or unconsciously, while trying to drag a finished thing across a threshold it was never meant to cross. Both roads end in release. Only one leaves you standing in your own authority. And make no mistake, your body has been preparing you for this all week. The fatigue was not random. It was instruction. It was your system telling you to stop investing energy in what has already reached completion. The dreams were not noise. They were closure in process, unfinished material being sorted in the dark. The tightness in your jaw, your chest, your stomach, your shoulders, those were not minor inconveniences. They were sealed chambers, asking to be opened before pressure forced them open for you. Even the grief, with no clear story, had a function. It was sorrow arriving early, so the ending itself would not have to arrive as a total demolition. You already know this. You have known it in flashes, in symptoms, in silence, in those strange moments where something in you went still and said, enough. Everything this week has been building toward this edge. Every transit, every delay, every emotional surge, every disruption in the ordinary flow. The eclipse is not creating the ending. It is formalizing what has already finished beneath the surface. It is cutting the final thread from what your deeper self already knows cannot come forward with you. And what follows will be cleaner, truer, more livable. Not because this passage is gentle, because it is exact. It does not take everything. It takes what no longer belongs. Nothing more, nothing less. So pay attention now, not to the noise of the mind, but to the testimony of the body, to your sleep, to your energy, to the places in you that go tight when you approach certain people, certain duties, certain futures. Name what your body has been saying. That is how you prepare. Something is ending, and that ending is not the collapse of the story. It is the opening of the next one. March 3 is 2 days away. Stay awake.